Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market, where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. Download the Jock Market app in the App Store today. The Android app is coming soon. Derek Van Riper here along with Jake Seeley and Michael Beller, getting you ready for Week 8 of this fantasy football season. Later in today's show, we'll be joined by Brandon Funston. Ed Mallion is back with another installment of Brits Picks, and Jake is absolutely celebrating Halloween the right way. I feel like I let the whole show down, especially our producer, Nando DeFino, by not dressing up. Good morning, gentlemen.
Jake's not
How's
here.
it going? Jake, you're looking good, man.
Yeah.
We'll see how long this lasts. Now I know why it's a kid thing, because like my neck's gonna hurt. I'm gonna be tilting my head down the entire time. This is pushing directly into the bridge of my nose.
I did 1 year in college. I kind of forgot to get a costume. Went to like the party store, found a kid's large SpongeBob SquarePants costume. And the only way it would work, I had to cut the sides, I'd cut the armholes bigger, because fortunately, at least by then, my arms were bigger than a child's. But it was the best costume I ever got. It was like $10. I got it the day of, and everyone
it
loved
was $15.
SpongeBob.
Nando saw it on Thursday. I had to cut the vest to like get it to just like basically squeeze my pecs.
Well, if you have questions about Jake's costume or anything, you send those our way on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. We'll get to those over the course of the next 90 minutes or so. The theme of the week seems to be bad weather, guys. I was looking at Kevin Roth from RotoGrinders has a weather report. 3 games in his red category. Patriots, Bills, Raiders, Browns, Vikings, Packers, all in just a terrible situation, mostly with lots of wind, but you get some cold temperatures sprinkled in there. You get some rain in there as well. We have a Titans-Bengals game with the orange label and a bunch of yellow games, which I think are generally pretty safe, but that would include Steelers-Ravens, Saints-Bears, which looked a lot worse a couple days ago, the Cowboys-Eagles matchup tonight, and even the Bucs-Giants matchup on Monday night. So let's just kick things off. As far as the weather we know about for Week 8, which adjustments are you making? Who's taking the biggest hits looking at some of the forecasts for today, Jake?
Yeah, I tweeted that out this morning too. I'm surprised that he doesn't have the Saints Bears in orange, and maybe Belair can tell us specifically. But the weather I'm looking at says 20 to 30 mile an hour winds, which 45 mile an hour gust. That's at least orange for me. If I'm putting colors on them, I put the Bears home game, Packers, Browns, Bengals, and Bills. I'd say all of those you're concerned about the passing game. The Browns probably the most, especially when you're getting some slight snow and rain mixed in. Buffalo as well, rain in that game. Really what you look for, though, is it's not the entire passing game. So one is you kind of give the running backs a little bit of boost. Everybody knows LaShawn McCoy goes 8 nuts in snow. So you see the advantage of running backs in that kind of weather. But the passing game can still work, but now you're looking for more of like the Beasleys, the slot guys, instead of anybody who's averaging high air yards per target. Those are the ones that usually get the biggest hit. So the quarterback and the wide receiver. So a downgrade to pretty much almost everybody in the Saints game on both sides of the ball, except for maybe Deontay Harris, but you were taking a flyer on him anyway. Same thing with the Browns, and maybe Higgins spends a little bit more time. Maybe you can see some Hunter Renfrow in that game, but that's the thing, like Beasley in the Buffalo game, Tyler Boyd with Cincinnati, you're looking for the slot shorter option guys.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you got a pass-catching running back, that's kind of the sweet spot for a week like this. The short passing game might be the only passing game that works in some of these matchups. Yeah, you can send compliments to Jake for his costume on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook as well. How about you, Beller? Any other thoughts on these crazy weather games that we're dealing with this week?
Yeah, Jake pretty much nailed it. I am sitting about 8.5 miles northwest of Soldier Field. Had the dog out this morning. Very cold, very windy. The game doesn't start, though, for another, like 5.5 hours. It's in the late window, so there's still plenty of time, and it's supposedly supposed to die down a little bit by the time that game actually starts. I think if it was a 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff for Bears Saints, it would be in that at least that orange category, but hopefully by time 3:30 Central rolls around, things are going to be cooled off a little bit. Jake pretty much hit everything, so I'll just give you something that I actually did do in one of my teams, Superflex League. I sat Baker Mayfield for Tua Tagovailoa, and earlier this week I figured Baker would be my guy in that spot even without Odell Beckham. But those wins have been shown to really affect passing games. And you think about the guys who he's going to be leaning on today. Rashard Higgins probably has a bigger role. That's a guy who we expect to make some big plays deep down the field. I just don't know if I trust Baker in those situations. And not necessarily Baker. I think you can make the same argument for Derek Carr on the other side of that game. So just to give you a real-life example, I am going to be there with you, sitting down Baker Mayfield, starting Tua Tagovailoa in his NFL starting debut against the Rams this afternoon.
Yeah, definitely some big season-long impacts and a smaller pool than we'd like for DFS purposes this week as well.
There's the vest I couldn't get on.
Yeah, so you got to go with some modifications there. You got to get a good tailor, Jake.
I cut it all up, but it looked like I had a crop top on Thursday.
That's not the look that you want to go with. All right, let's. We got a question from Jeffrey. What about the Vikings receivers? So thinking about Thielen and Justin Jefferson going to that matchup against the Packers today. Definitely among the worst conditions that we're talking about here. Thielen, to me, is one of those guys that does enough damage all over the place where I'm not moving away from him in season long. But Jefferson, I think his target volume is erratic enough anyway where you could probably make a pretty strong case for steering clear of him this week if you have a viable alternative. What do you think, Jake?
Well, so the real thing with Alexander is you have history that he doesn't stay specifically on Thielen in these games. So you've actually had Thielen go bananas against the Packers. And you've also had him kept in check. Jefferson would probably be the more concerning option, being a rookie, one, playing outside more, two, and that if Alexander's on Jefferson, I have a lot more faith in Alexander than I do have a rookie overtaking him, similar to Thielen can. So you can't bench Thielen. I would still have him as a wide receiver one. I actually still do have him as a wide receiver one because I think I'll be able to avoid him enough. Jefferson becomes a lot more boom or bust than he's been. He's getting the volume. He's been looking really good, but my concern is if Alexander's on him, I almost think he's getting taken away for the snaps that he's getting taken away.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a legitimate concern in this matchup. Now, the Vikings do get Dalvin Cook back today from that groin injury. At least he's expected to play. We'll get the official word here in about 25 minutes or so. We'll continue to scroll those along the bottom. Aaron Jones out again for the Packers. And we saw volume for Jamal Williams last week. Beller, late TD, really kind of tied it all together. It seems like a pretty good matchup for him against the Vikings. Obviously, the conditions are more of a run sort of script. What do you think about Williams this week going up against the Vikings?
Yeah, I think you're rolling him out there with a ton of confidence, basically the exact same way you felt about him a week ago. And he's not Aaron Jones, but he doesn't need to be Aaron Jones to give you at least RB2 numbers. Really, it really wouldn't matter the matchup, and this definitely is a beneficial matchup for any running back. We've seen that really all season long with the Vikings, but he doesn't necessarily need that to give you those RB2 numbers. This is a good spot for him. It's a good offense, and if you take anything away from last week, other than the fact that he just played well, is the fact that Matt LaFleur is not going to change anything in the offense, right? It is the running back role. Aaron Jones plays it to a 10. Jamal Williams plays it to a solid 8, 8.5, and that's fine. You don't need him to be Aaron Jones exactly to still show up with a very productive fantasy game for you. So this is a guy who, no question about it, if you've got him, I don't care how deep you are at the running back position, you're finding a way to get Jamal Williams into your lineup today.
Let's talk about Mark Ingram for a moment and his potential replacements. Ingram out with a high ankle sprain, so he's not going in that game against Pittsburgh. Jake, do you think it's going to be more J.K. Dobbins or more Gus Edwards? Where do you put those two backs as you look at this matchup without Ingram in the fold in that crowded backfield?
Well, call me crazy, but I have J.K. Dobbins as a solid RB2 because two things here is the Pittsburgh defense is worrisome, but they're a little bit more susceptible to pass-catching running backs. And if you expect this to be a game where they're passing more, we know Gus Edwards doesn't get involved in the passing game at all. So that's really where I'm looking at J.K. Dobbins. Also a pure talent opportunity here is finally the rookie running backs getting his opportunity. We see like Swift with the Lions. Just give him the chance. So if you told me it was going to be an even 50-50 split, I'm going to take Dobbins. And this could be 60, 70% Dobbins.
And on topic question here from Bo. Quick question for you, half PPR, flex one of Justin Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and LaMichael Pirine. Just based on what you said right there, Jake, I get the sense there's a good chance Dobbins is your choice here.
I'll go Dobbins, certainly. I think Pirine's unexpectedly a good upside play because there's talk that Frank Gore, if playing, could be limited. So if Frank Gore banged up, I don't like anybody on the Jets, but maybe they get a little bit more passes out of the backfield against the Chiefs. But, yeah, I would go still Dobbins, but I don't think Pirine's completely unusable.
Beller, is this the opportunity for Dobbins to sort of take over the backfield? Even if he doesn't get 80% of the touches going forward, could you see him maybe taking the lead and keeping that going forward?
Yeah, it's at least an opportunity, right? I mean, you got to feel good about that. It's also doubles not only as a game that Mark Ingram's going to miss, but coming out of Baltimore's bye. And we've seen that time and time and time again. It's a familiar theme across NFL seasons that we often see rookies get a little bit more involved after the bye week, that the team uses those 2 weeks to install a little bit more for them, put a little bit more on their plate. And I think that is something that is even more in play this season, given that every single rookie didn't have a training camp, didn't have preseason games, didn't have minicamp or OTAs or anything like that where they would start to learn things, right? These guys have sort of had to combine preseason and the first few weeks of the regular season into one. So this is definitely an opportunity. I think it's hard to say with the way that they've approached the backfield in Baltimore this year that it's going to happen for him this season where he takes over. I don't know if there's any 2019 Miles Sanders vibes here really for J.K. Dobbins, but definitely an opportunity to at least make himself the leader of a pluralistic backfield for the Ravens the rest of the season.
Got a question there from No Regrets MJ. Dobbins or Fournette in a standard league this week? What do you think, Beller?
I'm going to go with God. That's tough. I'm going to go with Leonard Fournette here, and I hate trusting the Tampa Bay backfield. But even though this is a standard league, we do like the fact that Leonard Fournette's been being used more as the pass game guy for Tampa. So you're not going to get those points, but you're at least going to get that usage. And we know that Bruce Arians isn't going to shut either he or Ronald Jones out of the running game entirely. So a close one for me, but I will trust Leonard Fournette, which should be a runaway sort of game for the Buccaneers tomorrow night.
Let's get to some news in the Bengals backfield. No Joe Mixon yet again. Jake, do we go right back to the well with Gio Bernard? Is he very safely like an RB2 just because of the usage in this matchup against the Titans today?
Yeah, I think for two reasons. One is we saw Gio last week. There's always the concern that Gio is not going to be Joe Mixon, someone like Alexander Madison before replacing Dalvin Cook. But we saw it last week. Tennessee likes to be aggressive on defense, so you can get some missed tackles. And also the weather. You expect this to be more passing to the running backs, more running game involved. So I think that Gio has to be in the RB1. I'm hard to see through this. I have Gio right now. I have Gio right behind James Conner as RB13.
I may have to pull up Jake's ranks just to help him reference those here in the next little while. A question from Mike. Half PPR needs a good flex play out of Tyler Boyd, Gio Bernard, or James Conner. How does he stack up against those options, Jake?
I would go James Conner. I don't have a problem if you want to go Gio, though. I feel Gio's safer, but I understand that James Conner's getting yanked a few times at the goal line for Benny Snell, and it's not the best matchup. It's just hard for me to bench James Conner, who I trust a hell of a lot more than Gio, despite – I mean, you can make the case that he's got the better matchup, the better game script, so I don't mind if you want to go Gio. It's always going to be hard for me to bench Conner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the usage is just too good. And that game of the – non-expected shootouts, I think, could actually track that way. I think those two offenses can put a lot of points on the board even against those respective defenses. Let's talk about Allen Robinson for a moment. He cleared concussion protocol on Saturday. It looks like he's going to go in that late afternoon kickoff today. My question for you, Beller, it's not so much about Robinson's trust level. Like, if he's officially in, let him go, no problem. What's going on with this group of pass catchers behind him? I thought Anthony Miller was the clear-cut number 2. He'd be productive week in and week out. We've seen a bit of Darnell Mooney in recent weeks. What do you do with your non-Allen Robinson Bears pass catchers? Just try to keep them on the bench and on the waiver wire as much as possible?
Yes, absolutely, exactly. Thumbs down, Mr. Duck up there. Definitely not trusting any sort of Bears pass catcher that goes beyond Allen Robinson. I think you could actually make an argument for Jimmy Graham just because of the fact that he has a lot of involvement in the red zone. He feels like one of the better choices among the pray for a TD tight end class. But Anthony Miller, it's just not happening for him, and we've expected it to happen now. I mean, we're talking about going on 3 seasons here, and it just hasn't happened for him breaking through. Darnell Mooney's an interesting guy from real life. I think he can make some big plays down the field for the Bears, and we've all seen the highlights from recent weeks where he has done his job, right, gotten open and been available for a big play down the field, and whether it's Nick Foles or the line not giving Foles enough time, they just haven't been able to connect on enough of those. But it's not like you're going to count on Darnell Mooney in this Bears offense with this quarterback making one of those big plays happen unless you absolutely have to. So I think there actually is, in deep leagues, a little bit of interest in Mooney because of that boom-bust potential that he does bring to the field every single week the rest of the year. But other than him, I think Anthony Miller is someone you don't even need to have on your teams at this point. It just hasn't happened for him, and I don't see it happening in this environment that Chicago's offense lives in this season.
Plus the weather. Foles is either going to throw it 20 yards over his head or 20 yards short. It's not going to get to him.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised, though, especially given how well Anthony Miller was playing down the stretch last year and how little they did to shore up that group of pass catchers. I thought he was going to be very productive this year behind Robinson, with Robinson commanding top attention week in and week out. We'll get back to some more news and notes a little later on in the show, but let's bring on more of our friends. We have Brandon Funston and Ed Mallion, and we've got a new segment this week. It is called Bubbles Bursting. So we're going to talk about some players who've been playing very well in recent weeks and try to get a sense of whether or not they're going to continue playing at these levels. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. I feel like we've all been completely outworked and out-hustled by Jake, and we'll have to make amends for that next Halloween. But here's how it works. Bubbles bursting. So you guys have bubbles in the form of balloons in front of you, and if you believe the player we're talking about is no longer going to sustain the level of production he's shown us in recent weeks, you're going to pop those bubbles. If you believe the player is going to sustain their current level of production, the balloons do not get popped. So we are going to begin with Chase Claypool. He had that massive Week 5 game. He had 4 for 74 and a rushing TD in Week 6, and then just one catch in Week 7 with the other pass catchers getting healthy in that Steelers group of wide receivers. What's going on with Chase Claypool? Where do we go from here?
Ed, you got to let me know whether I got balloons for you, too, so you tell me whether to pop.
You're going to have to stab one of those balloons, my friend.
We're popping two. Okay.
This one's not. Oh, what do we do? This one's not very explanatory. Are we talking about 2 weeks ago or are we talking about last week?
We're talking about the overall Chase Claypool breakout, which we started to see that decline from last week.
We popped your balloons, Brandon. Pop your balloon if you don't think it's going to continue.
Okay. My balloon is intact.
All right, so we have two of you guys that think good Chase Claypool is going to be a thing going forward. Let's start with you, Brandon. What makes you confident in Chase Claypool despite the disappointing game last week?
Well, because he's kind of unique in that system as being the big physical downfield guy. So I think that role is his, and Ben Roethlisberger likes to throw the ball deep. And I kind of look at him like this year's DK Metcalf. He's such a physical freak. I think that he can, I think more often than not, he's going to give you something productive. I can go into most games and expect him to make a big play. And we know after seeing him a couple of weeks of just going off where he's not just a one-trick pony. He's able to do stuff across the field as well. So I'm going to buy into it. I'm going to buy into him in that offense. And just like I said, how unique he is there.
Got a question there from Paul. Choose two in a flex league. Standard: Claypool, AJ Green, CeeDee Lamb, and Dallas Goddard, who was just activated from IR. Beller, you are also on the Claypool safe balloon side. So who do you like out of that group?
Yeah, I'm actually going to – I think Lamb's the easy sit from this group. I like the other three, especially since we're not necessarily too worried about the Cincinnati and Tennessee weather situation, a little bit worried, but that's going to be the thing that tips the scales for me. I'll sit A.J. Green also along with CeeDee Lamb. I will play Chase Claypool. I will play Dallas Goddard. I hope we get an opportunity to talk about Goddard a little bit later, but since we're on Claypool – I echo everything that Brandon said, and I'll just throw in the fact that I think a Ben Roethlisberger Pittsburgh offense is going to be capable of supporting 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers the rest of the season, even with James Conner being such a heavy usage guy, both on the ground and through the air. We just know what this Pittsburgh offense is, and Ben Roethlisberger, even into his late 30s, still enough of a thrower of the ball to be able to support all 3 of these guys. Are all 3 of them going to come through every single week? Of course not. We just saw it a week ago. That's not actually possible. But Chase Claypool, if you have wide receiver 3 expectations for him the rest of the season, not going to be bursting any bubbles.
All right, Ed, you had Jake pop the balloon in your honor. Why? What's your concern with Claypool?
It's just that there are the mouths to feed. I think that he is the deep threat with the physicality, but we've seen how I was a big Deontay Johnson guy at the start of the season, and he's had a lot of opportunity, but he's not made the most of it. But then on top of that, you've got James Washington in the mix, you've got Eric Ebron in the mix, you've got running backs around there. I think there are too many mouths to feed for Claypool to really become anything significant this season. He's capable of having those huge spike weeks, as we saw with that 4-touchdown performance. It's a joke, but you don't want to be chasing that all season. I think he's obviously a great own in Dynasty, but I'm not sure if he's a guy that I'm going to be holding on to for the rest of this season.
All right, let's move on to Jared Goff. Let's get some more balloons ready. Goff has a career-best 67.7% completion percentage so far this season, 12 TDs against 4 picks, 8 yards per attempt. He's got a pretty nice matchup today. At least no weather concerns on the road in Miami. Let's go on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
What are you doing, Ed?
Not from me, buddy.
Oh,
All right, so Jake. So 2 more pops for Jake. All right, Jake, why'd you pop the balloon? Why don't you believe in Jared Goff?
because he's Jared Goff. Period. Look, Jared Goff is as inconsistent as it gets, and you've seen the past couple of games that look, Woods and Kupp are getting taken away, and Woods and Kupp aren't even playing to the level that they should be playing. So it's not even just Jared Goff; it's kind of everybody involved. And week to week, if Jared Goff isn't throwing for 303, he's not running. He's not a running quarterback, and anybody in this range, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, all of them. I don't. Am I scratching here? I don't. Okay, here. So anyway. I'll just never be on Jared Goff. You guys know that.
I just like how when we talk about things on the audio team, we never consider a beak rubbing up against the microphone as bad microphone technique. That has not come up yet. It's not in the manual, but it will be now after this week. All right, we've got a question from Chris about Jared Goff. Josh Allen or Jared Goff when you
Josh
account
Allen
for the weather. I mean, here's the thing. So a mobile quarterback like Allen is less impacted by bad weather, right? I mean, even though he does take some shots downfield, that's a tremendous time to freeze, by the way. Looks like Beller's getting that next balloon ready. We'll see if he comes back to life there. Did anybody not pop the bubble for Jared Goff? Is there an extra belief? Yeah, there you go. We got one. All right. Why do you believe in him, Brandon?
Well, so it's again, I think it's a confusing question because you said all these things about Jared Goff. He's quarterback 18 in Yahoo leagues, and I didn't pop the bubble because I think that's who he is. Quarterback 18. I think what he's done to this point, he'll continue to do. And I thought that was the question. Do we believe in Jared Goff continuing to do all those things he said? And I'm like, sure. And he'll end up being QB 18.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, the bar is pretty high this year. Let's move on to our next player, Rob Gronkowski. And this is recent performance driven as well. 22 targets the last 3 weeks, had a 5 for 78 and a 5 for 62, the TD. Now in back-to-back games that we thought earlier in the year that his role is going to be very limited the last couple of weeks, maybe have us rethinking that. So on Gronkowski, let's go 3, 2, 1.
Don't pop it. Don't pop it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You guys are in agreement. Okay, why do you like Gronk, Ed?
So I think he's actually one of the great examples of why you have to be ready to kind of change your mind with new information. It would be easy to stick to my prior of Gronk being absolutely washed and Gronk being, just not looking fit, not looking healthy. But he's looked so different to how he looked in week 1. I think he's obviously got a little bit more conditioning behind him now. He's running the routes that you'd want from a tight end in fantasy. He's going deep down the field. It's 20, 30-yard catches. It's going into the end zone. It's exactly what you want from a middling tight end. If you haven't got Kelsey, if you haven't got Kittle, if you haven't got someone like Mark Andrews, one of the top guys, I think Gronk is a great streaming option. He's probably not available anymore, but I like his outlook for the rest of the season. I like his outlook today.
All right, let's get to one more. We've got Antonio Gibson as our next player. A season-high 20 carries last week, 128 yards. Did less in the passing game because the Washington Footballs dominated the Cowboys in that matchup. Is what we saw from Antonio Gibson last week a sign of things to come in the second half of the season? We'll go on 3, 2, 1.
Ed?
Keep it intact.
Don't do it.
All the balloons are intact. Wow.
Don't do it.
All right, we got Beller back, so we'll start with you, Beller. What makes you think this is the sign of things to come for Antonio Gibson?
Usage is there. The performance is there. This is a guy who a lot of us thought Antonio Gibson could become. This is the player we thought he could become quickly for this Washington football team, and he's done it. And I don't know why we would go back on that belief after the way they've used him and what he's done with that opportunity. We have to only assume that it's going to remain here or even get better going forward, and maybe a little bit more competitive of a team, especially when you look at the divisional matchups that they still have in front of them this season. This could be a team that we're talking about as maybe making a run to the playoffs here in Washington. So definitely has the feeling of a guy who is going to have this sort of role or even bigger in the fantasy world the rest of the season. Kudos to anyone who bought in at what is looking like a price that he is easily going to surpass for what he does in his rookie year.
Yeah, I thought it was going to take a little bit longer for Gibson to get to 20 carries in a game, but here we are. It only took about 7 weeks for it to happen. What do you think, Brandon? Is this, more of the same, 18, 20 carries, and probably more of a pass-catching role because this is a team that'll play from behind much more than they were playing from behind last week?
Yeah, last week was unique for them. And yeah, obviously we've seen him being involved in the passing game, and he was a receiver in college. So you feel fine about that. They have JD McKissick there who they'll use as well. But the guy who gives them the highest ceiling running the ball is Antonio Gibson. And but the nice thing is no matter what the game script is, he's a guy that can be used. Ron Rivera said there's a lot of similarities in Antonio Gibson and Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, we're not calling him Christian McCaffrey, but I think we all kind of bought into that idea that maybe they'll try to mine that talent and see if they can use them in similar ways. And I expect that to continue going forward. The thing is, it's not going to have the great games like he had against Dallas every week, but I think volume is something that we always preach here, and we feel pretty good that the volume going forward is going to be consistently good.
All right, that's going to wrap up this installment of Bubbles Bursting. Let's move on to Brit's picks. It's a chaotic week, like we were saying a little earlier, Ed. We have got the crappy weather. We've got some tough matchups in a few spots as well. So people are looking for all sorts of different ways to upgrade their roster last minute. Let's talk about a few guys that you really like this week. Where are you going on the wire to find some help?
So, I don't love the quarterback position this week, but I was looking and there's one name that stands out, and weirdly, it's a New York Jet. It's Sam Darnold. I think the game script obviously is going to be very, very strongly against them. I think they're 20-point underdogs now with some of the bookmakers I was looking at. And you've got to be looking at either a team that's going to be slinging it or a team that's going to be doing a lot of screens and yak stuff. So the other guy I do like is Derek Carr if he's available on your waiver wire, because I think that they will scheme up a lot of touches where he doesn't have to throw it far. He hasn't got the best arm in the world, we know, but he has guys who can outrun defensive backs. So I like Donald, I like Derek Carr, but the quarterback position is a little bit shaky this week, if I'm honest.
Yeah, Jake, I'm curious. Darnold being in this position as a huge, huge dog does have the game script that Ed mentioned. I kind of saw him as like a tournament dart. I kind of made a joke earlier this week in our Halloween piece that Michael Selfino, who will defend Sam Darnold and the Jets to death, will win the Millionaire Maker with a Darnold stack. But I feel like that's sort of the optimal usage, those Hail Mary type situations where you just need something to go right. Who does he throw the ball to? Denzel Mims is pretty popular this week, but is there anybody else that you like in that group of pass catchers given the circumstances?
No, that's the problem. I still have Sam Darnold down in the 20s, or actually around Tua, because everybody on DFS is on Denzel Mims because he's basically a big play waiting to happen. So the stack doesn't even become that profitable because you're going to be overlapping with Mims. Who else do you put with Darnold? Do you put P. Ryan out of the backfield? Do you put Braxton Berrios? I'm not saying the Darnold call is wrong. I'm saying in DFS, I don't know how you make it profitable because you're going to overlap Mims.
Yeah, I think Tua is kind of interesting too, Ed. What's your interest level in him if he's available? Would you consider him as a better option than Darnold?
I think Tua was the best quarterback in the draft. I wasn't as worried about the injury as kind of, I think people read too much into these things. Like you can have this guy for 15 years if he's the guy you think he is, and he was the best college quarterback we've seen in a long time. So I'm a big Tua guy. I think it's a really tough defense to play against in your first week. Brandon Staley's doing some really interesting things in LA. So I like Tua for the rest of the season. I don't know if I really love him today against the Rams, though.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what kind of game plan the Dolphins offense has cooked up for him in his first start, given the difficulties of that matchup. Let's talk about running backs. Who on the waiver wire at the running back position catches your eye this weekend?
I actually made a trade this week. I traded away Tevin Coleman and I got Zach Moss in return. I think it's an interesting little one. I kind of like both of these guys. I think Tevin could pop. We know that the Shanahan running backs, obviously, like anyone could go on any day. Jerick McKinnon last week, if you started him, you found out the hard way that it might not be the guy that you have. But I like Tevin Coleman. He had a heavy load in practice this week, they say. If he can get 7 to 10 carries and some catches, I think that this is a really good opportunity for Tevin Coleman to do something. I also like Zach Moss. The thing about Zach Moss is Devin Singletary has not really won that backfield. He's had a lot of opportunity to do so. I think this game script and the way that the weather is looking for Buffalo today means that Zach Moss needs one good performance really to win this backfield outright. And I think that if you have him now, then you've got the chance of winning a guy who can take over that backfield as we head towards the fantasy playoffs this season.
Now, I'm curious, real quick, Jake, what are your thoughts on the San Francisco backfield with Coleman back in and the injuries they've been dealing with? Jermichael Hasty looks pretty interesting at this point as well. Like, how do you break them all down?
It's like when I fly planes, you're likely to crash. It's like the truth is, like, yes, Tevin Coleman got Ed and I were actually texting about it, And Tevin Coleman could easily get 15 touches. It is not a custom mask. I bought it for $15. It's a kid's mask, and that's why it's killing my nose. Anyway, Tevin Coleman could lead the backfield. 15 touches against Seattle, you would feel great about. But Hasty could be the guy. Hasty wasn't the guy last week. They gave it all to Jeff Wilson in his first game back. Jerick McKinnon sounds like he still is going to get relegated to the third option. But what if Jerick McKinnon gets 12? And what if he gets most of it in the passing game against Seattle? So I'm staying away as much as possible. If I'm going for one, I would reluctantly go Tevin Coleman.
All right, let's shift over to the wide receiver position. A tough week to find receivers with so many games having the terrible weather conditions we were talking about earlier. Where are you looking for a possible waiver replacement at wide receiver this weekend?
I actually love this pick. It's Denzel Mims. Talent meets opportunity in this one, really. He's a first-round pick. On his first appearance last week, he was tied for the lead in targets on that team already with 7. Now we've got Rashad Perriman out. I think Crowder's out. He's 6'3", he's got great burst, he's athletic, elite body control, he makes huge, splashy plays. He ran a limited route tree at Baylor, that's fine. He's had 8 weeks of learning on the sidelines, albeit with the worst coaching staff in the league, but he's got a lot of raw, explosive talent. If you can bet the overs on receptions and yards today, it might be the last opportunity you get to do for a while with Denzel Mims. I love the game script. If you don't have the cojones to start him today, at least stash him on your bench because of what he could be. But I love Denzel Mims today. That's my wide receiver play for sure.
Yeah, we got a question there about Denzel Mims from Eric. CeeDee Lamb or Denzel Mims in a half-point PPR. So it's Mims for you. Ed, what do you think, Jake?
I would go with Mims, too. I'm going for the upside here, so I'll throw one back to Ed as well. Would you go Mims or would you go either Giants receiver against the Buccaneers?
I'd probably prefer Mims. I think the Bucs have got a really stout defense. I don't like Daniel Jones or the Giants offense much, but I think we've seen Mims get 7 targets. If he can get 9, 10, 11 targets against the Chiefs, and that's probably going to translate to 10 points plus. And I love that upside today.
Got one last question for you, Ed. At the tight end position, if you're looking for some help on the wire, this has kind of been your sweet spot all season. Who do you like this week?
I've got another one I love today. It's Albert Okwuegbunam, of course, of Denver Broncos. He's a Mizzou kid. He played with Drew Lock in college. They've got a great connection. He missed the start of the season injured, but he came in week 6 targets straight away, 7 targets in week 7. He's way better than Noah Fant. He's a big guy. He's explosive. He stretches the field. He lines up out wide and catches these deep balls. He bursts up the seam. He's got everything that you actually want from a fantasy tight end. So Albert O, let's call him, for the Denver Broncos today. I really, really like the way he's looking.
I think the data is interesting, but he's better than Noah Fant. What do you think about that, Jake?
Of course he is.
Well, maybe long term better than Noah Fant. I don't know if I'll go with that because I still think Noah Fant's the better receiver, but there's chemistry there. The biggest issue I have, so I do like it. I would still start Fant before I start Big O. That's what we've been calling him, just to not have to pronounce that last name. Is Tim Patrick sounds supremely doubtful. So you're talking about rolling out KJ Hamler, Tyree Cleveland, and the other one that I can't think off the top of my head. I'm all of a sudden having a brain fart. Hey, I'm getting the launch pad over here. I'm an idiot all of a sudden. But I think that if you're looking for Big O is like a tight end too, mid-range with, hey, if he finds the end zone, then certainly. I think it's a very thin week for looking at tight ends, honestly.
All right, that is going to wrap up our latest installment of Brits Picks. Ed, enjoy the games this week. Looking forward to catching up with you again next Sunday.
Good to see you guys.
It's Ed Mallion with the latest Brits Picks. We've got a few more questions to get to. We'll bring back Brandon Funston to help us out with those. And I think we're not getting that many questions about Jake's costume, which is kind of surprising. But BCM wants to know Mims or Henry Ruggs in a standard week. So, Brandon, Mims for Jake? What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I think Mims too is a guy I loved coming out of Baylor and just hasn't been healthy. But given, weather situation and just the fact that Jamison Crowder, Rashad Perriman down, Mims is a huge opportunity. And with Derek Carr, Nelson Aguilar is there. He hasn't been peppering wide receivers with targets anyways. And I think this is a Darren Waller game. Maybe Ruggs gets a big play, but when I'm looking at, floor and the expected volume, I feel better about Denzel Mims.
It really is too bad that we're losing this game's full potential with the weather, because I think the Browns leak big plays through the air. Henry Ruggs could have done some damage today if not for those poor conditions. Jade wants to know, do I wait and see if Chris Carson plays with Hasty as my pivot, or do I start LaMichael Pirine or James White in the early games? What do you think there, Jake?
I don't think that waiting is that safe. Hasty's fine, but if you're looking for the best play, I'm going to go back to Pirine. I just think that the fact that Frank Gore is sounding questionable, and even if he does play, Pirine is not going to probably get more than 3.5 yards a carry, but he's going to get some passing game work. Even if Carson's active, what if Carson, Dallas, and Travis Homer are all active, and all of a sudden Carson leaves early, or Carson gets the Jerick McKinnon treatment? I don't think that's that safe to wait on.
No, I've got that exact same problem with Chris Carson in my home league. A couple other injuries and bye weeks. It's basically Le'Veon Bell or wait it out for Carson and then scramble on the wire. I think given the way that the Chiefs have that 3 TD line in their favor, I think even Le'Veon Bell over Chris Carson, based on what we know right now, might have to be the way to go. I got a question from Mike. Full PPR, James White, JaMycal Hasty, or LaMichael Pirine? What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I'll just echo Jake's sentiments about Pirine. I think he's the call here, and James White would be interesting, but he had 10 snaps last week. And the thing about Pirine is, unlike White, is that he'll get carries, but he also might just be as heavily active in the passing game as James White might be as well. So I'm turning to volume on this one.
Got a few injury items scrolling by. We've got official confirmation that Dalvin Cook is good to go today. Tyler Higbee, good to go for the Rams. There was some question as to whether he was going to play with the Rams having a bye coming up in Week 9. Damian Harris also active for a pretty banged-up Patriots team. We'll keep an eye out for more of those here in the next few minutes. Matt wants to know Josh Jacobs or Ronald Jones in a half PPR league. What do you think, Jake?
That's Jacobs easy for me, especially because now you also have the weather leaning more on the run game. I think everybody's panicking about last week, but nobody runs on the Buccaneers. How many times do we have to say that? So Josh Jacobs, I understand that Ronald Jones could easily get multiple touchdowns against the Giants because they should be up early, but we're questioning the split in that backfield where Jacobs is the guy.
Yeah, Jacobs, you're so much safer for the 20-plus touches that you're looking for from your running back in that situation. Alfred wants to know Woods, Deontay Johnson, or T. Higgins. He needs 2 in a full PPR situation. What do you think, Brandon?
Oh, man, I think I got to look at my rankings. I think these guys are like back to back to back. I feel best about T. Higgins, and I think my second guy is going to be Robert Woods. I can't even really give you, a great angles other than I just feel like this could be a Robert Woods week. So, and I like, the weather and the other ones are going to be potentially impactful. So I'll go Robert Woods and T. Higgins there.
Now, we expected Jamison Crowder to sit out today. We have the official word that he is officially out. Frank Gore is in, by the way. I don't know how much that'll change our calculus with LaMichael Pirine, but I think as Jake said earlier, the expectation is that Gore will probably be limited. Niner Raccoon has a question for us. Diggs, Galladay, Fulgham, Ayuk in a half PPR league. Who would you sit? Niners leaning Diggs because of the bad weather. I don't think you want to go quite that far. Diggs isn't just a deep threat, right?
Right.
A player like Henry Ruggs is the kind of guy that I'm absolutely getting away from because there's low volume and those shots come downfield. Diggs can run any type of route, so don't sit Diggs. Who would you sit instead, Jake?
I would actually sit Ayuk. I understand Ayuk is a free space in DFS, and I have him as almost a must start in most leagues this week, but I'm not sitting, I'm not sitting Fulgham, especially not against the Cowboys. And it really comes down to Ayuk. And then he mentioned Diggs. There's no way. Diggs, if he ran, again, to go back to the beginning of the show, if it's a big air yards per target player, like you mentioned, Henry Ruggs, you mentioned the big ones, like if Brian Edwards was back for them. But you look at Renfro being better in that game, Cole Beasley being better than John Brown, but not Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs can catch plenty of shorter yards and do a ton after the catch.
I got a question for you guys just about Deontay Johnson real quick before we get to Eric's question. 10 targets in the opener, 13 targets in week 2, 15 targets last week against the Titans. Beller was saying earlier, this is a Steelers offense that, with Ben Roethlisberger, they can probably sustain 3 pass catchers week in and week out. I believe that, but is Deontay Johnson the true number 1 based on volume in this offense at this point to a level where you just lock him in until the price ticks up in DFS and he's just an automatic start and season long at this point?
Yes, and I was going to disagree with Brandon's pick before because Deontay Johnson is fully in every single – he is a must start. I'm not benching him for anybody at this point.
Yeah, maybe people are looking at that matchup against the Ravens and steering away a little bit more than they should. Eric wants to know, is Dallas Goddard worth starting this week coming off of IR, or would you choose someone like Jimmy Graham in that matchup against the Saints instead? What do you think, Brandon?
Absolutely, Dallas Goddard. Love the guy. I think he's very likely to be a top 5 tight end the rest of the way. Look, the Eagles have completed more passes to the tight end this year. Last year, they led that category by 30. Carson Wentz loves throwing to the tight end, and Dallas Goddard is a legit talent. And I think he was about to take off before he got hurt and just be on a great run. But I think, it's been delayed a few weeks now, but I think he's ready to pick back up, assuming he can come back and be, mostly fully healthy in his first game back. But even if he's, 90%, I want Dallas Goddard in my lineup.
All right, we're going to get to a few more questions here in just a few minutes. We've got some fun that our friend Nando DeFino had playing with the tools over at Sport Radar for a segment we're going to call Is This a Thing? So these are some facts that Nando dug up that he wants to know. Are these actually actionable or useful nuggets going forward? So the first one, 100% of Terry McLaurin's plays this season have resulted in a first down. I mean, Terry McLaurin gets a lot of praise on this show, Jake. Is that something that is interesting to you?
Well, it's more interesting. It's telling, I should say, is because if you told me 100% of the first reads is Terry McLaurin, that's really what it is. That's why he's getting all those first downs, is because he is the guy. He's the second guy. And then we might get Logan. By the way, I'm not thinking. I'm just trying to hold this off my nose because my nose is killing me.
Yeah, we're getting a little beak on Mike.
I know. I realize that. That's why I backed up a little bit. But yes, Terry McLaurin. This is why Terry McLaurin's a fringe wide receiver 1, is because he's just the first and second option essentially in the passing game.
Yeah, this is where DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones and Michael Thomas, this is where they end up at the top of the first down leaders list, because they're just the biggest alphas out there. And Terry McLaurin's in that group. He's just in a bad environment. And if he had a better quarterback and if he had a better offense around him, he would be, we would have seen this more often. But I think this is the career arc that he's going on. He is just the alpha of this Washington offense. And as good as they get, the better he gets.
All right, so I think that is a thing. 100% of Terry McLaurin's plays this season have resulted in a first down. All right, here's the next one. The quarterback with the third most air distance, which Sport Radar defines as from the quarterback to the intended target for completions and incompletions, is Carson Wentz. Tom Brady's fourth, by the way. Brandon, is this a thing? I mean, Carson Wentz throwing for lots of yards that aren't necessarily turning into meaningful production.
Yeah, I mean, Carson Wentz doesn't get enough credit. I remember it was a few weeks back, and I think I even had to ask the Philadelphia beat writer for The Athletic, Zach Berman, like if how bad do they have to get for Wentz before they start thinking about Jalen Hurts? And he was like, and that was just a question that was kind of going around a little bit. I didn't really believe that they would ever turn away from him, but he was struggling early on. But you get it; everybody's injured, and the guy was trying to figure out a way to make things happen, is causing turnovers, but he's also ran for 5 touchdowns, and he's really done a great job of kind of salvaging this offense and starting to turn this ship around. So I give a lot of credit to Carson Wentz. Tom Brady being up there in air yards, I'm not surprised. He was decent in throwing the ball deep last year. It's just they didn't have any weapons. He didn't do it a ton, but his metrics on throwing the ball 20-plus yards were really good, and now you're in a lot more conducive environment for that. So not surprised about Brady. Wentz is a bit surprising considering that, Jalen Reagor and Deshaun Jackson and some of those guys you would expect some decent air yards from have been out, but he's made a thing out of Travis Fulgham. And it's just, I again, 2 thumbs up to Carson Wentz. He's overcome a lot this season so far.
Yeah, they've had injuries all over.
2 things. Fulgham helped Carson Wentz. He didn't make a thing out of Fulgham. Get that right. And second of all, I see the comments, and I'm actually getting like sweat in here, and there's been an itch like right here. I can't scratch for the last 5 minutes, so I appreciate you guys.
We're going to hold Jake on the show as long as possible and just turn this into a pure endurance contest.
I can't scratch it.
Niner Raccoon wants to know
that's the same one.
Galladay,
Ayuk.
Yeah, we got that one earlier. Yeah. Let's go on to Nelson Aguilar for a minute. He came up a little earlier in the show. He has the 17th highest average top speed in the NFL this season. That includes guys that have only been on the field for a couple of plays as well. I don't think of Nelson Aguilar as a top-end sort of burner. Is that surprising to you, Jake?
It's a little surprising to me. I didn't really think of him as that either. Actually, when he came out of college, I said he probably peaked in college, and that wasn't, it wasn't that negative as it sounds. I got a lot of pushback on that. It just who Nelson Aguilar was in college is who he should be in the NFL, and somebody that I said who could separate very well, but he's a limited wide receiver. The confidence factor came into play. We've talked about it before on the other shows. Emery Hunt, friend of ours, mentioned that he's got that confidence back from USC. I think that's telling. And I don't know what he's been doing to pick up that speed a little bit, but I'm surprised by that. But I'm not surprised this is Billy to separate.
Yeah, you know what? That's been shocking to me because I did not. By the time he left Philadelphia, I thought that he wasn't a very fast guy. He just looked sluggish. But the funny thing is, twice I've watched Nelson Aguilar make a big play this season and had the announcer mistakenly call him Henry Ruggs first and then have to correct himself, which it speaks to how his speed has kind of been on an uptick this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. If you're Nelson Aguilar and you're being mistaken for Henry Ruggs, it means you're moving pretty fast. So we'll call that a thing, too. All right, Jimmy Garoppolo has one completion this season that went for more than 20 yards. He's tied with Jarvis Landry, and even Tyrod Taylor, who only played in Week 1, has 2. So is this a thing we should be concerned about going forward? What do you think, Jake?
It is, but it's more so for Jimmy Garoppolo and then trying to find any value outside of Debo and Ayuk at wide receivers. That's why Debo and Ayuk fit well for him, and Kittle's the first option. So Kittle being the first option is already going to bring that number down a little bit, but also Garoppolo's play. Debo and Ayuk are middle intermediate guys, and that can work for Garoppolo. But even in what you can consider a great matchup today, and he doesn't have to deal with weather, there's still going to be a ceiling because it's just never going to be the flip side where we just talked about Wentz and Brady. It's going to take 40 attempts for Garoppolo to potentially just get to 300 yards.
Yeah, and let's not forget Debo's been hurt and Garoppolo's been hurt and missed games. And, you look back to last year, he had 19 pass plays of 20-plus yards, which was, an average of a little over 1 per game. So I think the combination of the injuries hurts. And as Jake mentioned, just the kind of the makeup of this offense being a short and intermediate range focus will generally keep that number down, and throw the injuries on top of that. This is what we get.
I'm going to mash the last two together because they're from the same offense. Gunnar Olszewski has spent 9 of his 10 snaps in the slot. No Julian Edelman today for the Patriots. And then Damiere Byrd is among the top 10 in total distance traveled at wide receiver. Of course, this is really only up for some topic or some debate because someone's got to catch passes in New England, we think. Maybe not. I mean, it's a mess. It's Byrd, Jacoby Myers, Olszewski, Ryan Izzo. Like, what are they going to do against Buffalo? And is there any reason to be interested in Byrd, seeing him on a leaderboard with Tyreek Hill and Robert Woods and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Terry McLaurin? What do you think, Brandon?
Look, to kind of go the opposite of Jerry Maguire, you lost me at Gunnar Olszewski and Damiere Byrd. Look, I wasn't even playing Julian Edelman. And with him out, why do you want any of the guys? If you watch the Patriots, you watch the way Cam Newton's throwing the ball. He's throwing like the ball is magnetized to the earth. The ball is just driving into the ground. Its mechanics are all messed up. He's all messed up. I don't want any part of this offense. I don't know how you turn it around magically with Damiere Byrd and Gunnar Olszewski. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, what's the air yards done for Damiere Byrd? I mean, I think this is you kind of can look at these lists and see a guy that maybe hasn't had great fantasy production, but he has the big air yards, and you can kind of get excited about him still, like a Henry Ruggs. But I think in the case of Damiere Byrd, those are just going to continue to be empty air yards.
Well, you left out the one name. It's Jacoby Myers. I actually added Jacoby Myers in all of my deeper leagues because similar to Gunnar, spending a lot of time in the slot, but getting a heck of a lot of snaps in that first game back last week, had 20% of the target, actually is over 20%. Jacoby Myers is a thing. He's been a thing in the past, and I don't disagree with you at all, Brandon. It's just, if you're looking at Cam Newton's style, give me the guy who's in the intermediate short game who can get open quick. There's some appeal for Gunnar, but I think Myers is playing in front of him. I would like Byrd. I would like Byrd more if this game wasn't so concerning with the weather, because he could be Henry Ruggs-like. But I actually think Jacoby Myers could be sneaky this week.
Yeah, if Myers ends up being the volume guy, then there's definitely some DFS appeal or full PPR league sort of appeal with him. I feel like this total distance travel leaderboard is like a Peloton leaderboard. It's like these guys worked really hard. It doesn't always translate to production, right? It's like, oh, they did a lot of cardio. He burned a lot of calories. That's great, but he didn't actually do much with those opportunities, unfortunately. stretching the field. Someone's got to do it. Let's get to a few more questions here before we say goodbye to Jake. CFC fan in a full PPR league wants to know Jerick McKinnon, Joshua Kelly, or Sterling Shepard. What do you think on this one, Jake?
I'm going Kelly, the safest route. I don't think you need to risk. Sorry, I don't think you need to risk Sterling Shepard against the Bucs. But if you need that upside and you want to wait, but I mean, you're not going to be able to pivot to anybody else in that game if you wanted to see what you needed. So I'm going to go with Kelly. And then since they just threw up the second question real quick, this one, Kelly again is the safest one. I would go for Dobbins in this upside. I think Dobbins could have his breakout game. He's supremely talented, but Kelly is again the safe play.
What do you think on that one there, Brandon? That one's pretty
tough.
Yeah,
I think Dobbins. Jake was mentioning Dobbins earlier. I'm absolutely in agreement because he's the one running back there that is can make a case of being as good as anybody running the ball and catching the ball. I mean, he's definitely better at both Ingram and Gus Edwards in the passing game. But I think this is one of those games we're going to need the running back to actually be active in the passing game. So with Mark Ingram out, I think this is a big opportunity for J.K. Dobbins. Although I don't have him really much ahead of Le'Veon Bell, who I think Andy Reid's going to figure out a way to get him a touchdown against his former team.
Yeah, Dobbins versus Bell is another option I've got in that home league problem I was describing earlier. David wants to know, in a full PPR league, Darrell Henderson or Leonard Fournette, the projections are identical. Jake, can you break that tie?
Yeah, because my rankings aren't identical. I have Henderson. Look, I have Henderson quite a bit ahead of him. I actually have Henderson. It looks like a 15 or a 16. I can't tell you exactly. But the truth that I do know without having to look it up is that the Dolphins are top 6 in yards allowed before and after contact. So if you're talking about somebody like Henderson that can do a ton with that, that's why I like Henderson so much this week.
I just like how much thought you're putting into these answers this week, Jake. Christy wants to know Justin Jackson or J.K. Dobbins. Lots of Dobbins questions trickling in. Need to play next week, too. What do you think here, Brandon?
Yeah, I think we're going to go back to Dobbins here. Jackson was in the last question involving Dobbins and went Dobbins. And I think I don't have the schedule in front of me for next week. But if Mark Ingram's out, I'm going to go J.K. Dobbins again. And if J.K. Dobbins is big this week and Mark Ingram comes back next week, I think they might be willing to, let J.K. Dobbins get on a roll if he has a big game this week.
Oh man, Dobbins versus Bell. I've already changed it twice since we started talking about it as we're going through these questions. Let's get one more here before we say goodbye to Jake. And it comes from Scott, half PPR league. Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios, Rashard Higgins, Denzel Mims, Michael Pittman, Traquan Smith, or Deontay Harris. Just one out of that group, it looks like. So who do you choose out of that group, Jake?
I'm just going Mims again. Mims, look, he could be a bust, but out of all these guys, I can't read them, so I was trying to listen as intently as possible. Mims just feels in a great situation, and the boom bust factor is mitigated a little bit by the fact that you probably assume he's going to get 7-8 targets because there's nobody else left.
There's no way this person's rostering all these players. I think he has Corey Davis.
That's what I was thinking too.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the waiver wire there. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's going on there. All right, Jake, this is going to wrap up your portion of the show. Any parting shots here before we go for week 8?
Yeah. Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Hope you have good luck in week 8. No more injuries.
I kind of think we should have you wear some kind of mask every week. I think it just adds a bit of whimsy to the show. But
no more hulking out Jake, angry Jake, beast Jake.
No more of those. I mean, we'll have to get some masks that fit your face better than the
Yes.
child's medium that you have.
Yes.
But we'll see if we can dig up some budget for that. So, all right, Jake, enjoy week 8. You can get all of Jake's updated rankings and his waiver column each week, matchup rankings, all that stuff for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Brandon, don't you feel like we missed an opportunity to load up on great costumes on the show? I mean, I just think that's going to have to be a thing we do more often.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's like Christmas. Once it's passed, I can't, I think it's water under the bridge at that point. I have a hard time still doing Halloween stuff the day after. But Jake, that's his thing. I said for 2020 only, and normally I'm a Christmas song after Thanksgiving kind of guy, but the uniqueness of 2020, we need all the holiday cheer we can get. I said, game on for Christmas songs November 1st. So today for me, it's no longer Halloween, it's Christmas time.
Wow, you're doing 2 months of Christmas music.
That's right. We need it. 2020 calls for 2 months of Christmas music.
You know what? To each their own. Do what you got to do to cope. This year has been absolutely terrible. We'll catch up with you here in just a few minutes. Let's bring back Michael Beller, and let's talk about Jock Market for Week 8. We're going to talk about a few players that Beller likes on Jock Market. Be sure to go to the App Store now. The Android app's coming soon, and you can start making money this week. The goal each and every week is to find some underpriced players who are going to exceed expectations. Beller, where do you start? Who are some of your favorite buys this week on Jock Market?
Yeah, we're going to have a little theme here. Underpriced doesn't necessarily mean guys that we're not talking about. I'm starting with James Conner. I know it's a tough matchup going up against that Baltimore defense in Baltimore. It could be a game that plays to an underscript. I'm not so sure about that, but whether it does or it doesn't, James Conner just has such a meaty role in Pittsburgh's offense every single week that it frankly doesn't matter. Every week except for week 1 where he left the game with an injury, at least 18 opportunities, meaning carries plus targets. Each of the last 2 weeks, 20-plus carries. Remember, last week against Tennessee, that game got close, but they did not go away from James Conner whatsoever. Basically, you are locking in an 18-touch floor for one of the best running backs in a very productive offense in a game that should be close, could go back and forth, and maybe is a little bit more high-scoring than people are expecting. And you're getting James Conner treatment in the Jock Market marketplace as though he is like an RB2. And that's just not the case for James Conner. For me, this is a top 10 fantasy running back going forward for the entire season and every single week. There are some guys for whom our schedule just doesn't matter. James Conner is in that group of guys, so treat him like the RB1 that he is this week.
No, I think a lot of people feel kind of like Phil, who's got the question up on the screen there. He's considering sitting James Conner today.
No way.
Because no one runs on the Ravens. Okay, who are you going to play instead, I guess, is a question I would still ask. But generally, because the workload is so high and because that offense is probably a top 5, top 6 sort of offense, even in a tough matchup, I don't want to steer away from Conner. I think there's actually some tournament appeal for big field GPPs with Conner this week because he's going to be relatively low usage. Let's talk about Keenan Allen for a moment. Why are people not all over him? The pricing algorithms are low on him. He's clearly Justin Herbert's favorite option in that passing game with the Chargers.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get why we're not seeing a little bit more love for Keenan Allen in the DFS marketplace too. But even in Jock Market, we're not seeing really just yet a huge bid on Keenan Allen, and that's something that you're going to want to get in on. I mean, this is someone who is clearly the number one target for Justin Herbert. You just look at the usage that he has had with Herbert at the helm here. 10 targets, 19 targets, 11 targets. Last week, 13 targets. The only game where he didn't get double-digit targets was a game that he left early because of injury, and he still scored a touchdown in that game. I mean, Keenan Allen is getting massive usage. Keenan Allen is getting Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, Julio Jones sort of usage in an offense that likes to throw the ball with a very productive quarterback in a game that I think could be close with Denver here today. I mean, there is just no strikes against Keenan Allen at all today or any sort of week. This is another one where it feels like, matchup concerns maybe have run amok, but every single week there are certain guys you just don't worry about anything with, and Keenan Allen is in that group of players at the wide receiver position. So another guy who I think the market is treating as a high-end wide receiver 2 who should be treated as a wide receiver 1 every single week.
I think your next call is probably the most bold of all the players we're talking about in this segment. Tua Tagovailoa going up against the Rams. First NFL start, of course, threw a couple of passes in Week 6 in that blowout against the Jets. What's the reason that you trust them in this matchup against the Rams? I think that's my concern. It's not so much the talent. I think the talent's off the charts. I'm kind of like Ed Malyon, where I believe that Tua might have been the best quarterback in this draft. And that's no disrespect to anybody else in the class, but the Rams have been tough on opposing quarterbacks so far. So why do you go with Tua here?
Yeah, first of all, this is definitely a Jock Market style of play where I just think he's undervalued. I'm not out here saying that Tua's going to be a top 5 quarterback necessarily today, but it's got a lot to do with the fact that this is just a guy who I think is undervalued. It also has something to do with the fact that it's not necessarily as bad a matchup as you might think when you look at it just on paper. The quarterbacks who have really struggled against the Rams here this season: Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, Alex Smith in a second half performance against the team when he came in for an injured Kyle Allen. There's a familiar theme there, right? Guys who who can't really get outside the pocket, get away from the rush, and do things with their legs. The quarterbacks who have not struggled against the Rams: Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Jimmy Garoppolo. Kyle Allen ran for a touchdown in the first half of that game before his injury made him give way to Alex Smith. Quarterbacks who can get away from rush, get away from pressure, actually haven't had it so bad against the Rams this season. We know that Tua is that sort of guy. I mean, we're really going to see it for the first time here today, but hard to believe the Dolphins would have used the 5th overall pick on him if they didn't believe that that hip was fully healthy. Hard to believe that after they've been able to see him now for months, that they would throw him in if he couldn't do all the pre-hip injury Tua things that we saw at Alabama. So I really think this is going to be a nice play for Tua Tagovailoa. Top 5 quarterback this week? I'm not so sure about that. Top 14, 15 quarterback this week? I think definitely. So I really like him in this matchup, actually.
Yeah, one more play you want to bring up, a popular guy in most DFS settings, Alvin Kamara going up against the Bears. It's going to cost you a pretty penny on Jock Market, but you think he could be maybe the highest scoring player of the week?
Oh, yes, I do. Exactly, Derek. When I went through the IPO and I clicked on Alvin Kamara, at the price he was at, it said he needs to be the number 12 player to break even at this price. And I said, okay, well, he's going to be the number 1 player in fantasy today. This is just Alvin Kamara is going out there every single week and giving you 120, 130 yards from scrimmage. He's doing it without Michael Thomas. There is no more Michael Thomas again today. This Bears off defense, it can be run on. We have seen it now week after week after week. Still a hard off defense to throw against, but you can run. You can gash this team on the ground. We saw Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown do it a week ago, and Alvin Kamara, another one of those guys who fits the matchup doesn't matter category. He's going to have a huge game on the ground. He's going to have a huge game through the air. I think we see something on the order of 150, 160 yards from scrimmage and a couple of trips to the end zone for Alvin Kamara. So yes, you're going to have to pay up for him, as you should with Alvin Kamara, but this is the number 1 flex play of the week. Alvin Kamara, in my mind, really no question about it. Maybe Derrick Henry pushes him a little bit, but I think we're going to just see a monster game out of Alvin Kamara against the Bears this afternoon.
Yeah, definitely seems like he could go crazy, have one of those 25, 30-point games with relative ease, especially in full PPR formats. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. We got a few more news items to get to, so to break those down, let's bring back Brandon Funston. And as we knew going into the weekend, Miles Sanders still banged up, not going to play in tonight's game against the Cowboys, so Boston Scott gets another opportunity, maybe his best matchup yet. Kind of falls into the same boat as a couple of the players we talked about earlier. Gio Bernard, kind of similar, right, where it's all about the usage. It's not necessarily we think Boston Scott is going to do a lot of great things efficiency-wise, but if he's getting 15-plus carries and a handful of catches, he's pretty easily in that RB2 and flex conversation. I think the bigger question, though, in this game, guys, Ben DiNucci is starting at quarterback for the Cowboys. What do you do with Amari Cooper? What do you do with CeeDee Lamb? We've had a lot of questions trickling in throughout the show about those guys. Does DiNucci bring as much floor for the offense as Andy Dalton did the last couple of weeks? Does he actually bring a bit more ceiling? How do you break down this offense with Ben DiNucci at the helm, Brandon?
Well, the offensive line is in tatters, and Amari Cooper, the last 2 weeks without Dak Prescott's managed to get 70 yards or, 70 to 80 yards and 7 to 8 catches. So I think he's the one guy that you still play, but I think all bets are off on the other 2 receivers. I would be surprised if this offense doesn't just fall more into the arms of Ezekiel Elliott, that this will be, he's the one guy that you can just feel safe about volume, kind of taking him to a useful place in fantasy. But Ben DiNucci, it's an X factor. I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but I know that I have him ranked last among my quarterbacks this week, and he could be really good. But I think the environment situation with that offensive line in front of him is in such a terrible shape that I just don't know how you would, roll the dice on a guy like this.
All right, we got a question here from
Uncle
John
Jesse.
Stamos. Yeah, Uncle Jesse chiming in.
Oh, my God.
Two deep threats.
Blown away.
Henry Ruggs or Hollywood Brown with the other options on bye in a full PPR league. I think the weather concerns, especially for the Raiders, that's enough to knock Ruggs to the bench. I think you got to go Brown in this spot, right?
Yeah, definitely. Total agreement here. And even, I mean, they've both underperformed a little bit to expectations from the start of the season, but they're right in line with one another. So I think Hollywood's probably the better player, a little bit more advanced in his career. And then Weather is an easy tiebreaker, even if you think they are neck and neck.
Question from Evan. Who are you starting between Rashad Higgins, Jalen Reagor, and Marquise Brown? Popular guy in these questions. I mean, I still think you got to go Brown there, right, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to really mess with Jalen Reagor in his first game. And, we talked about the weather in that Cleveland game being a potential issue. So I'm going to go back to Marquise Brown for all the reasons we just mentioned.
I'll say it again. I think that game between the Steelers and Ravens can actually turn into a shootout, which is pretty fun. If you can stack that game up in DFS, you can find ways to get some of those guys into those last couple spots in your season-long lineups. No Debo. We talked about Brandon Ayuk a little bit earlier. We talked about that messy backfield. As you think about this offense, Brandon, do you trust Ayuk to get steady volume? Kittle's obviously the number one there, but is Brandon Ayuk as safe a play as the fantasy community is making him out to be this week?
Yeah, I think so. Coming off the big, 100-plus yard game with Debo out, and he's kind of a Debo doppelganger, a little bit bigger in size, but a lot of that physicality. And I think in this game with no Debo Samuel, you'll probably see like 3 jet sweeps for 25 to 30 yards for Ayuk that you can throw on top of his receiving numbers. But Seattle's been decent in run stop and run defense, and you look at that banged up backfield for San Francisco, I think they're actually going to lean on George Kittle and Ayuk a decent amount, and we absolutely know you can throw on the Seattle Seahawks, so I don't see any reason why the 49ers would not try to go to Ayuk early and often.
Let's talk about the Seattle backfield for a minute. This is your area of expertise since the backfield is kind of in your backyard. I mean, Chris Carson's questionable, Carlos Hyde's doubtful, Travis Homer's supposed to be a game-time decision. Brandon, is it DJ Dallas time? Is he going to be the guy that actually leads this backfield in Week 8?
It could be, and I worry for Russell Wilson's safety. And man, we talk about a guy that on tape maybe had the worst running back pass blocking piece of tape in a game ever last week. Just letting the guy run right by him and completely unawares, but it was so obvious to everybody. They had to get that short up. I'm sure they worked on that a lot, but Chris Carson, I honestly don't expect him to play. Everything I've tried to glean about this injury, the midfoot sprain, even our health person, our injury expert, Virginia Zakas, they think this is a potential 3 to 4 week injury. And it's been really surprising that they're talking about this being a true game time decision. If I was laying money down on this one, I would bet that we're going to be looking at a lot of DJ Dallas in this game.
I almost wonder if beyond this week, we might see little Alex Collins, right? He's back in the fold on the practice squad. I mean, he might have a role at some point, given how banged up they are at that position. Question from DJ, Le'Veon Bell or Travis Fulgham in a flex spot. It's a 14-team full PPR league. What do you think, Beller?
I'm going Fulgham here. I love the Lev Bell revenge game narrative. It's going to be fun, and I do think that he's going to get plenty of touches in that game. But we've seen it week after week from Travis Fulgham, and even with Reagor and Dallas Goddard getting back into the lineup here today. First of all, these are their first games back from injury, so we're not exactly sure what they're going to look like, what the role's going to be. And even if you grant a 100% normal role for both of them, Travis Fulgham has proved himself to be a very capable wide receiver 1 for this Philadelphia team. Another guy who I don't think we need to consider too often in start-sit decisions. I think your default position on Travis Fulgham should be in my lineup, and I think that's the spot where I find him here today. So I'm starting both of these guys in different leagues where I have different needs, but I think if I have to choose between the two, I'm going to trust the volume that Fulgham's been getting, trust the ascending offense that we're seeing in Philadelphia, and trust the matchup against a dreadful Dallas defense, all lining up for a nice game for Travis Fulgham.
By the way, I just want to throw in, I think this is the undercard of revenge narratives with Melvin Gordon going against the Chargers. And we got to throw Jimmy Graham going in against his old New Orleans Saints team as well.
Yeah, there you go.
He's played for about 5 teams since then, but still has some bad blood with the Saints not keeping him around all these years, I guess. Our Steelers writer, Mark Cabali, is reporting that it was raining and dark and cold in Baltimore, and then it just stopped raining and the sun came out. So maybe the weather taking a turn for the better in that Ravens-Steelers matchup. Field looks a little moist, but it should be okay. So not bad conditions there. Commander Adama wants to know, Gordon or Fournette in a PPR league? Melvin Gordon's getting volume, Brandon. He's just not very efficient. It looks like Phillip Lindsay is going to be available. He's been dealing with a concussion. What do you do with those two backs?
Yeah, I'm going, pretty much guaranteed volume in Melvin Gordon, and the revenge narrative, going to motivate him as a motivational factor. I don't think that's a thing, but I just think Melvin Gordon, you feel better about the volume than you do Fournette. I think this is actually probably pretty close. I expect Leonard Fournette to be the most valuable Tampa Bay running back going forward. If you look at last week's game, Greg Auman talked to me about how they ran Ronald Jones out in the flat on a play and he missed the pass, and Tom Brady immediately shot Bruce Arians a look. They put Leonard Fournette into the game. I think it was right at the beginning of the second quarter. They ran the same play. Fournette caught it. They gained 6 yards. From that point on, Fournette had 11 carries to Ronald Jones's 7. And so if Leonard Fournette's a big bump up in the passing game over Ronald Jones, but not that big of a downgrade or somewhat on the same level as Ronald Jones in the run game, then it just makes a whole lot of sense that you're going to leave Leonard Fournette out there so that you don't give defenses a tell as to whether you're going to run the ball or throw the ball.
Yeah, here's an update on some of the weather from Kevin Roth of Roto Grinders. Look at Cleveland. 35-mile-per-hour sustained winds with 44-mile-an-hour gusts. In Green Bay, it's 24 sustained with 44 gusts. Buffalo getting worse, 13 sustained with 29-mile-per-hour gusts. In Cincinnati, 24 and 36. I mean, those are all like sustained winds.
You got to put that thing back up. I was writing it down on my little whiteboard. I need to set my lineups after this show. So
there you go.
Chicago's also bad at
Cincy,
this point, but
Chicago,
decreasing by kickoff, as he notes, right? So you got to keep that in mind. Like, that game's still 4 hours away from starting in Chicago, so it might not be as bad as it seems right now.
Thank you, Nando. I got it written down.
There we go.
It was weird. I feel like I really had a small player pool for DFS this week because of those terrible conditions at so many different spots.
For sure.
SRC wants to know, pick 2 in a non-PPR league out of Claypool, Goddard, Rager, Mike Williams, and Corey Davis. Man, Mike Williams, I thought he was a fun tournament play last week. He was a ghost, and Justin Herbert pretty much threw a touchdown pass to everybody else on the roster in that game. So curious which 2 you guys like here. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, you throw the PPR out. I think I'm going Dallas Goddard and Chase Claypool, 2 big options that could make some big play. Goddard's going to be a guy that Carson Wentz is going to look to in the red zone, and Claypool has that big play potential for touchdown. To see him score 4 in one game. So if you're going standard league, I think you're going Goddard and Claypool here.
All right, got a question from Cody. Travis Fulgham, Cooper Kupp, or Tyler Boyd in a full PPR league? Let's choose one. Beller?
Want to play them all, Cody. I think these are 3 very comfortable, easy starters. I'm going to lean ever so slightly toward Cooper Kupp in this one, but it's one of those really no bad decision sort of things. But with the role Cooper Kupp plays for the Rams, you know what? The positive arguments for all 3 of these guys are very easy to make. I'll make a negative argument for Boyd in that we just saw the weather concerns that the Bengals are going to be dealing with, even though he has that guaranteed volume. And while I just sang a paean to Travis Fulgham maybe 5 minutes ago or so, you do still have some questions with what the roles might be, how the roles might change now that Philadelphia is getting healthy. So that's the negative arguments. You can make positive arguments for all 3 of those guys pretty comfortably and easily.
All right, Sean's got a question. Pick 2 at Scotty Miller, A.J. Brown, A.J. Green. I'm not sure which A.J. that is. Corey Davis, T.Y. Hilton, and DeAndre Swift. I guess we can kind of go both ways with the 2 A.J.s here. If it's A.J. Brown, he'd be locked in, right? So we'll assume it's A.J. Green at this point. Choose 2 from that group, Brandon.
I'm gonna kind of steer clear of the weather again. I think Scotty Miller is a pretty good play with Chris Godwin out and Antonio Brown not in the mix yet. We've seen that happen and play out. We saw it play out last week. So I think Scotty Miller and DeAndre Swift, no weather situation there. But DeAndre Swift, interesting because he's been so involved in the red zone, is the number 1 running back in half PPR fantasy points per touch, and we're seeing that touch volume go up. So feel good about him as well.
All right. Looks like Slim Shady weighing in with Dallas Goddard or Hunter Henry in a half-point PPR league. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, I'm going to go Dallas Goddard here. I'm with Brandon. I knew we were going to get to Dallas Goddard eventually, which is why I didn't touch on him when we first brought him up a little bit ago. I think Dallas Goddard's a top 5 tight end the rest of the season. I think he would have been treated as a top 5 tight end at the start of the season if we knew that Zach Ertz was totally done or that Zach Ertz was going to spend a lot of time injured this year. I think Dallas Goddard is just an ascending talent, someone we are going to really be treating as a top 5 tight end for the next couple of years. I think it starts as early as tonight against Dallas. You're going to love having Goddard on your team, in your lineup every single week.
All right, there's a great. Oh, man.
Yep.
Oh man, and now it's hailing. I need a heater. That looks pretty bad. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Avoid that game if you can. I mean, Kareem Hunt, Josh Jacobs, fine. Darren Waller, of course. Other than that, you might want to stay away from that game entirely.
This is a week where fans aren't going to be complaining about not being able to be at the stadiums.
Yeah, stadium would have been pretty empty anyway with those conditions in Cleveland today. Let's get to a few fill in the blanks. My favorite part of the show each and every week. Let's begin. Blank will lead the Kansas City running backs in fantasy points today. Let's assume a full PPR league. What do you think, Brandon?
I'll still lean Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's going to still be the volume leader. And full PPR is kind of key for me in this. If you said in a standard league, again, I really think Le'Veon Bell has a good chance to score a touchdown today. He's going to be the guy most likely that they use at the goal line. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not been good in that capacity this year. So I think Le'Veon Bell scores a touchdown, but in a full PPR, give me Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
What do you think on that one, Beller?
I'm going to agree.
That's been one of the big questions all week is like, how does Bell fit this time around? Like, he played quite a bit last week, and neither guy had a ton of volume, but I don't know. It was a pretty weird split.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for sure, and I think Bell's going to get plenty of run in the second half especially, but really no way to go against Edwards-Helaire in a game where the Chiefs are favored by 3 touchdowns.
Now, we kind of hinted at this one a little earlier, but Blank will be the Jets' most valuable pass catcher today. We'll stick with a full PPR sort of assumption. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, I'm going to join the chorus singing to Denzel Mims here. It's got to be him, right? I mean, he's the most talented guy available. I think he's going to soak up the most targets as a result of Jamison Crowder being out. I think Michael Pirine could make semi-run at this fill-in-the-blank, but I don't see how you really go against Denzel Mims. And we're obviously reverse engineering ways to get more love thrown in Denzel Mims' direction. It's like we started with, how do we talk about Denzel Mims as many different times as we possibly can? And we're finding a way to do it, which is a success. But this should just drive home the point that Denzel Mims, very good player, and this is a script that's going to play to his benefit. Jake talked about it on one of our podcasts earlier this week. We have seen 18 or 17 games that have had 14.5 spreads or bigger going back. I think the number was 5 years that Jake put out there. Might have been a little longer. That doesn't really matter. In those 17 games, the team that was the underdog has produced 18 100-yard receivers. Denzel Mims is the most obvious guy to do that for the Jets here today.
Yeah, I think we need to put quotes around valuable, though. As much as we like
Sure.
Denzel Mims to lead this group, I think the over-under on Jets touchdowns is probably 1, and Denzel Mims, 5-6 catches, 60, 70 yards might be what your expectations should be for him. And LaMichael Pirine, I think he actually leads the Jets in catches, but I think in overall value in a PPR sense, when you factor in the yards, I think it's Denzel Mims.
Yeah, man, part of the appeal with Denzel Mims, too, is DFS and how cheap he is, right? He's 3,200 on DraftKings, and given the script of that game, that's also driving a lot of interest. Obviously, his pedigree and the fact that Sam Darnold is healthy helps quite a bit as well, but I think you want to be a little more careful with Mims in season-long formats because it's not a discount play that unlocks a bunch of other things for your lineup. It's Mims versus someone else on the wire or someone else on your roster. DeAndre Swift will finish as the blank-ranked running back from this week forward. So kind of a rest-of-season question with Swift in a full PPR format. What do you think, Brandon?
I think you're kind of looking, because it's Detroit, because there's some socialism involved in that backfield, and I just can't see Swift ever becoming like that 20-touch-a-week guy. I'm feeling like 15, 16 at the high end and probably no worse than 18, 19 at the low end. I do not think he's going to ascend into RB1 territory because the volume can be so inconsistent. So give me like a rock solid RB2 kind of player going forward.
Yeah, I think I heard a 15th, 16, and 18, 19, which probably means 17th is your answer.
Yeah, actually, I think that's, we can go with that. I'm fine with that.
Let me just jump in and say I swear to God that I was going to say RB17 is what I would if I put a fine point on it. RB17. I swear on every single fantasy team I have the rest of the season, that is exactly where I was going. So RB17, we're in agreement here. This is great. From Chicago to Seattle and back again. RB17.
Rubber stamp it.
cop coming here to agree or something like that.
Well, I figured we should get some talk in here about Lions-Colts because it's one of those games that doesn't have weather concerns on a slate full of them. So on the other side, blank will be the Colts' most valuable pass catcher today. We'll stick with full PPR. I'll throw in that Michael Pittman is active today just to complicate matters even further. What do you think, Beller?
Yeah, I think this is going to be just basically throw a dart and hopefully your guy gets in the end zone. I think that's really what it's going to be. So I know this isn't necessarily the answer that Nando's looking for when he puts together the show sheet, but I'm going to say the person who scores a touchdown will be the most valuable pass catcher. And of course that's true for a lot of teams, but let's boil it down to what the point is. The point is that you don't really want to trust any Indianapolis pass catchers. I think this is a bad offense, and I think this is a potentially fraudulent team. I actually think Detroit wins this game and pulls off a little bit of an upset, and I just don't think we're going to really be able to rely on any Colts pass catcher the rest of the season. I think Jonathan Taylor's role is going to get bigger, get a little meatier, and be something that you're fine starting him. But I think other than that, you're not really going to feel good about throwing any Colts in your lineup unless injuries, buys, something along that sort of lines forces your hands. This is just a bad offense, and I'm not giving them points for 2 weeks ago coming back against the Bengals when they dug themselves a 21-0 hole. Like, who cares? Right? This Bengals defense is nothing. They should have never been in a 21-0 hole to begin with. So I think this is just going to be a bad, disappointing offense the rest of the way.
I will say I'm not really in disagreement with Michael there on that one, but I will say T.Y. Hilton just to give us an actual name. Coming off the bye, getting the Detroit Lions, and this should be a T.Y. Hilton week if there ever is going to be one. And if there's not one, then it's time to just kick him completely to the curb. But I think it was Stephen Holder who just came out with in the Athletic Beat Writer roundup, asking about a established veteran who's underperformed, who have a better second half, and he threw out T.Y. Hilton. He's not given up on him, thinks he can happen. And if it's going to happen for him, it should happen after a week of rest against a pretty, porous Lions secondary. So again, I think this is put up or shut up time for T.Y. Hilton.
And this was my crazy question. This one wasn't on Nando. The next one will be from Nando, but Mo Alley Cox is back, so it complicates the tight end picture. Like Trey Burton looked kind of interesting with Mo Alley Cox down. Like it's a mess. I think Brandon, T.Y. Hilton, maybe from like a DFS perspective, you're trying to get into this game, you take a shot on him in some big field tournaments, and maybe you get rewarded because it's been surprisingly quiet from him, and that Lions defense is still one that I'd like to pick on where possible. But here's the Nando influence on the show sheet. Rank these: Crackle, Smarties, and Whoppers. He's all over the road. Those aren't even all chocolate. Like what's going on here?
I mean, those all have to be candies from like 1950 or earlier, right? They made their debut.
Smarties probably came out in the Roaring 20s.
Man, Crackle, Whoppers, Smarties.
Yeah,
pretty easily. I think
that's mine. The Crackle's kind of the poor man's Nestle Crunch, but that's solid.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
I would like to know, how is a Crackle actually different than Nestle Crunch? Have we been duped for years where they've been marketing us two bars that are actually the same?
Maybe a poor man's is actually maybe the exact. Maybe they live in the exact same neighborhood. They're neighbors.
Yeah, no different
different
wrapping, different company. I think that's the only difference there. Smarties are just like sour chalk discs.
They're just not good at all. I like sour candy, and Smarties are just gross. You should flush those down the toilet. Next one here. AJ Green will have a blank week than Henry Ruggs. We'll throw this one to you first, Brandon.
I will go better. As Jake's talked about it the last couple of weeks, they've changed AJ Green's role, and they're using him more inside. In a weather game like this, a big target, big catch radius, with all the volume that he's been getting, he actually might be able to do okay in that short to intermediate range. In with Ruggs, we're seeing Nelson Aguilar kind of becoming that number one. But again, I talk about Derek Carr. The guy he targets is Darren Waller, and he very rarely just really kind of goes heavily on a wide receiver for high volume. We saw it a little bit with Nelson Aguilar last week with the 9 targets, but generally the wide receivers in that Raiders offense have been some of the least targeted group in the league.
Yeah, I'm going to say I agree with Brandon on the better, so I'll say more predictable because of the weather. AJ Green is maybe the guy in Cincinnati who's going to be least affected by the weather because of that changing role, because so many more of his routes are coming in that short and intermediate range, and Joe Burrow is going to be able to hit those a little better. And we've talked about Joe Burrow having some trouble pushing the ball down the field in his rookie year. It's really the one thing he struggled with. So I think we could see an even bigger role for A.J. Green in this game than we've seen from him over the last 2 weeks.
The Bengals schedule the rest of the way so generous to opposing wide receivers, too. Good matchup today against the Titans. You get the Steelers coming up after the bye. You've got the Giants, the Dolphins, the Cowboys, the Steelers again, and the Texans all through the fantasy playoffs. So only one tough matchup.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer when weather messes up a good situation. You'd rather him be playing like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or something where you just like, okay, we know it's going to be bad. Let's just make it worse.
Speaking of weather, Zach Jackson, who covers the Browns for The Athletic, reporting that it's snowing again in Cleveland. So just real pleasant conditions in Cleveland. Nice place to hang out. Bad weather, though, unfortunately. Let's go to our next one. Dallas Goddard will have blank fantasy points than Devin Singletary in PPR. So we're thinking sort of a flex sort of question here. What do you think, Beller?
I'm going to go Goddard. Has more points than Devin Singletary. The problem with Devin Singletary remains the fact that Josh Allen is maybe the best running back on that team and certainly one of the most used running back on that team. He just throws such a monkey wrench into the equation. You need a touchdown, right? If you're going to be Devin Singletary, if you're going to be Zach Moss, you need to get in the end zone, and Josh Allen takes so many of those opportunities away from you by scheme and by the fact that he's just good at it, right? I mean, and with them throwing the ball more, it's giving him more scrambling opportunities as well. Brandon and I have been beating the Dallas Goddard drum quite a bit this morning, and you can go back and check the receipts. Brandon and I have been doing this for weeks now. Two of the biggest Dallas Goddard fans I think there are in the fantasy industry. Everything we've already said, it applies here too.
All right.
Yep. Nothing to add. I just think Dallas Goddard scores a touchdown and Devin Singletary doesn't. Singletary has one touchdown and 99 touches this year, and that'll be the difference.
I'm glad we have someone who's kind of picked up the torch from Steven Sims as the most loved player on our show. Let's go.
We did need that pivot for sure.
Let's go to our Survivor segment. Okay, so I think it kind of goes without saying, if you were the type of person who still had the Chiefs left.
I have not said the Chiefs on this show once. I just want that to be clear. So they're open to me.
You would use them here, right? I mean, I think the weird thing would be that in a pool where they haven't been used by a lot of teams, which I don't think exists in most pools, you'd get leverage by not using them, but a 3-touchdown favorite, that's a college line. We don't see that in the NFL, right? I mean, you'd have to use the Chiefs if you had them.
The Jets have had one score loss this year, and that was last week to the Bills, and it was an 8-point loss. So their one score would have had to been to score a touchdown and convert a 2-point conversion. So yeah, I think they're as good as it gets for sure. So other ones, I mean, Tampa, are they going to really go into New York and lose on Monday night? I think Tampa's a great one as well. I mean, Philadelphia. Beller, you probably got some sleeper one you want to throw out, but Philly, Tampa, Chiefs, those are kind of chalk.
So Philly is the thing you got to like about Philly a little bit is that you're probably not going to have too many spots where you feel great about using them the rest of the season. And who cares if you lose in week 8 or week 11? When you lose, you lose. In Survivor, it doesn't really matter. So this is going to come down to your pool and how many people are still left in it. If you're one of 5 people, then take the Chiefs if you still have them. If you are one of 75 people, you might want to turn away from that. And the Eagles are a good play, I think, if you're looking for a spot where you can get in on a team that you're not going to have very many opportunities to use the rest of the season. Outside of that, I think it's hard to really get to find a ton of pool equity because beyond Kansas City, Philly, and Tampa, who do you really feel that great about putting your Survivor life on the line against? If I was going to pivot away from what is going to be the 3 most popular picks, I go to Green Bay. They're just a better team than Minnesota. And the spread being a touchdown, maybe you don't love them covering that, but of course you don't need them to in Survivor. And they're just the better team playing at home. I think even more equipped to handle the weather than Minnesota is. I mean, Kirk Cousins in 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds, that is not a good formula. And even with Dalvin Cook back, just think that Green Bay is better equipped to handle all those elements than the Vikings are.
Yeah, one quick note on the Vikings. I believe they're down their top 2 starting cornerbacks this week. And, they traded Yannick Ngakoue. So if that weather cooperates, Aaron Rodgers could have an absolute field day against this Vikings team.
Yeah, might be a lot of quick hitters to Devontae Adams, and Adams doing a lot of work after the catch this week, given the windy conditions at Lambeau today. We got one more question. I think it's specifically for Brandon, too. No, this one's from Niner Raccoon. We can get to that one first. Crazy question. Could Burrow against Tennessee be a better start than Lamar Jackson against Pittsburgh? What do you think, Beller?
It could. I mean, could is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Of course he could be, but I wouldn't start him over Lamar Jackson. I would be semi-tempted if Cincinnati, Tennessee weren't one of these games that had weather concerns, that had wind concerns. Then I would be potentially tempted because of the volume that you're getting out of Joe Burrow every single week, and because of the fact that he has these three weapons who have emerged for him. But with that, on top of the fact that Lamar is Lamar, I wouldn't have the stomach to do it.
24-mile-an-hour winds knocks over potted plants on my deck and takes my deck umbrella and sends it flying across the yard. So, yeah, that's legit wind. Yeah, I'm definitely going Lamar Jackson this week.
I know. All summer, the tomato plants were tipping over. Now the mums are tipping over. It's out of control on my patio right now. This wind has to stop. All right, let's get to our last question. This one is for Brandon. At least I believe it's for Brandon.
Ooh, can't wait to see.
I know. Anando had something cooked. Oh, here we go. Brandon Funston's, not a question. It's Brandon Funston's top 100 Christmas songs. You ranked 100 Christmas songs?
I did, and we'll see if that gets updated this year or not. But you see the Spirit of Christmas right there, number one, the Ray Charles. It's the Chevy Chase scene where he's in the attic and he sits down and watches the old movies. It always seems to get really dusty in the room when I'm watching that scene. I don't know why, but yeah, it always gets me for sure.
Oh, wow. Little Drummer Boy, Bob Seger. I actually haven't heard that version. That's actually one of my least favorite Christmas songs, but I like Bob Seger.
Well,
so
yeah,
I'll
but
have to check that out.
Seger's got to step that up.
Yeah.
Definitely. Love Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. Brenda Lee. Great song. Great song. Love the Home Alone scene with that playing when he's got all the strings pulling and the silhouettes of his cutouts in the window.
Yeah, the cardboard Jordan.
Try to hold all your body parts in check during that song and not have something just naturally move.
Well, you have nothing inside you if you're able to hold the body part. You might have the body parts, but there's nothing inside really. There's no structure holding things together.
And it's November 1st. It's game on for Christmas music this year.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down. I'm in with that.
The same as my little brother. My little brother starts listening to Christmas music every year around this time. So if you're like Brandon, if you're like my little brother, you want to listen to Christmas music for the next 56 days, I think it is, feel free. Check out Brandon's list. 100 songs, that'll at least give you a chance to not go completely crazy because the same 5 songs that play over and over on the Christmas channels.
That's right.
Those are brutal. You can't do it that way. Gentlemen, any parting thoughts here before we go for Week 8?
Like I said, it's going to be fun to watch some revenge games. Lev Bell against the Jets and Melvin Gordon against the Chargers. Jimmy Graham against the Saints. And then just the weather. The weather's going to be the big story. How much of a factor does it end up really being? I tend to think that we generally blow these things up out of proportion and they don't end up being as bad as we say. But wind is the one crazy thing that can really mess with things big time. So if that's a thing, I'm worried for a lot of guys.
Can Ben DiNucci, of all people, save the fantasy value of Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, whatever Michael Gallup, whatever husk of fantasy value he still has, Dalton Schultz, Ezekiel Elliott? Can Ben DiNucci do it? Find out tonight. Let's do it. Let's ride.
NBC should use you to hype up that game because that game should have been flexed. That game should be happening in 27 minutes, not at not at prime.
Get
time.
Ravens Steelers on Sunday night.
Yeah, that's the game we deserved on Sunday night. All right, well, good luck in Week 8, gentlemen. We'll look forward to doing this with you again next Sunday. That is going to wrap things up for our Week 8 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by Jock Market. You can take control of your fantasy sports experience and download the Jock Market app now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. If you don't have a subscription to The Athletic, you can get one now for $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. That deal expires, I think, tomorrow, so you're going to want to get that right now. For Jake Seeley, Michael Beller, Brandon Funston, Ed Mallion, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 8.